I just watched something on NBA Today that has me completely rethinking the Golden State Warriors' entire trajectory, and I need to talk about it right now before I lose my mind, because what the analysts broke down today wasn't just some casual conversation about potential trades or free agency targets. This was a full-blown surgical breakdown of how one single player could transform the Warriors from a play-in team desperately hoping to catch lightning in a bottle with Steph Curry into a genuine, terrifying, nobody wants to face them in the playoffs type of contender. And the player they were talking about, the name that had the entire panel in agreement for once, the one move that everybody said would change everything for Golden State, Jerami Grant. Now I can already hear some of you saying, wait, Jerami Grant? That's the guy who's gonna save the Warriors? That's the guy who's gonna make them championship contenders again? And I get it. I totally get why you'd be skeptical, because when you think about what the Warriors need, your mind probably goes to a young superstar or a dominant center or maybe a dynamic point guard who can take pressure off Steph. But what NBA Today laid out today was so much smarter than that. So much more nuanced. So much more aligned with what actually wins basketball games in the modern NBA, and by the end of this, I promise you, you're going to see it. Hey, what's up everyone? Real quick before we get into everything, that like button is literally what determines if this reaches hundreds or thousands of fans. Takes 1 second, but makes a huge impact on the channel's growth. Just smash that like button right now. It's the easiest thing you can do, but honestly, the biggest way to support this content. Every single like pushes this further, so hit it now. So the segment started with a conversation about where the Warriors are right now as a franchise. And look, the picture isn't pretty. They're locked into the 10 seed, heading into the play-in. Steph just came back from a knee injury and looked good, but the team still lost to Houston. Porzingis just had arguably his worst game as a Warrior, getting absolutely cooked by Alperen Sengun. Al Horford is dealing with a calf issue. The roster is thin on size. The young guys like Brandon Podziemski are talented but inconsistent. And the defense, which was supposed to be the backbone of this team, has been communication dependent in a way that falls apart the second you start playing small ball lineups with 4 guards. That's the reality of the Warriors right now. And the question on the table was pretty straightforward. What does this team need more than anything else to take the next step? And one of the analysts didn't even hesitate. He said the Warriors need a wing, a real wing, not a guard playing out of position at the 3, not a small forward who's really a shooting guard, a legitimate 6'8", long-armed, switchable, defensively elite wing who can also score and shoot from the perimeter. And then he said it. The best available player who fits that description in the NBA right now is Jerami Grant, and if the Warriors could find a way to get him, this entire conversation about their future changes overnight. And here's why that statement is so powerful, and why it resonated with me immediately. The Warriors' entire system, everything they do on both ends of the floor, is built around movement, intelligence, and versatility. On offense, it's constant motion, off-ball screens, back cuts, dribble handoffs, guys relocating and making reads in real time. It's beautiful basketball when it works, but it requires players who can think the game at a high level, who can make the right read without needing the ball in their hands, who can shoot when they're open and cut when they're not. And on defense, it's about switching, it's about communication, it's about being able to guard multiple positions so that pick and roll coverage doesn't break down and leave guys scrambling to recover. Jerami Grant is literally built for this system. Like, if you sat down and designed a player in a lab specifically to play in the Warriors system, you would come up with something that looks remarkably similar to Jerami Grant. The panel broke it down position by position, and this is where it got really granular and really convincing. On offense, they talked about what Grant does for Steph Curry's ability to operate, and this is the part that blew my mind. One of the analysts pulled up data showing that Steph's efficiency in pick and roll and off-ball actions increases significantly when he's playing alongside a wing who can space the floor to the three-point line and threaten to cut to the basket. And the reason for that is simple but brilliant. When Steph is running off screens and coming around picks, defenses are programmed to chase him. They're gonna send help, they're gonna trap. They're gonna do everything they can to get the ball out of his hands. But when you have a guy like Grant on the floor, a guy who can knock down open threes if you leave him, a guy who can slash to the basket if you close out too hard, a guy who demands defensive attention just by existing on the court, suddenly the defense can't commit as much to chasing Steph. They have to stay at home on Grant. They have to respect his ability to score. And that creates more space for Steph to do what he does best, which is get open, catch, and shoot in rhythm. One of the analysts said Steph Curry with a legitimate spacer like Jerami Grant on the floor is the most dangerous offensive player in basketball, and I don't think he was exaggerating. And then they talked about Grant as a secondary creator, which is something the Warriors have desperately needed all season. Because here's the dirty little secret about the Warriors offense this year. When Steph is off the ball and somebody else has to create offense, it often falls apart. The ball sticks, the movement stops, guys start taking contested mid-range jumpers or forcing drives into traffic, and that's because outside of Steph, the Warriors don't really have a reliable guy who can break down a defense one-on-one and create a good look either for himself or for a teammate. Jerami Grant is that guy. He can take a defender off the dribble, get to his spots, pull up for a mid-range, get to the basket, or draw the defense in and kick it out to an open shooter. And he doesn't need to do it 30 times a game. He just needs to do it 8 or 10 times a game in those moments when the offense stalls and somebody needs to go create something. That alone changes the Warriors from a team that lives and dies with Steph's shot making into a team that has multiple ways to generate offense, which is way more sustainable over a 7-game playoff series. Now, let me get to the defensive side because this is where I think Grant's impact on the Warriors would be the most transformative. And I need to set this up properly because if you watched the Houston game last night, you saw exactly what happens when the Warriors don't have a real wing defender on the floor. Porzingis got destroyed by Sengun because there was no help available on the perimeter. The Warriors were playing 4-guard lineups trying to recover on rotations, and they couldn't close the distance. The communication broke down because when you're small, every breakdown is magnified. You don't have the length or the size to recover from mistakes, and the result was Houston's offense looking way more efficient than it normally does because the Warriors simply couldn't match up physically. Now imagine Jerami Grant is on that floor instead of one of those undersized guards. Imagine a 6'8" guy with a 7-foot wingspan who can switch 1 through 4, who can guard Kevin Durant on the perimeter, who can drop down and contest Sengun at the rim if needed, who can close out on Jabari Smith without getting blown by because he has the lateral quickness to stay in front. The entire defensive complexion of the Warriors changes. Suddenly, you're not a team that has to play perfect defense to get stops. You're a team that has the physical tools to get stops even when the communication isn't perfect, because Grant's length and versatility cover up so many of the weaknesses that plague the Warriors when they go small. And one of the analysts made a point about Draymond Green that I thought was incredibly insightful. He said Draymond is still the defensive quarterback of this team. He's still the guy who orchestrates the defense, who makes the calls, who directs traffic. But Draymond is getting older, and his physical ability to recover and switch and guard multiple positions has diminished somewhat. He's still brilliant defensively, but his body can't do everything it used to. So having Jerami Grant next to him, a guy who can handle the most physically demanding defensive assignments, a guy who can take the toughest matchups so Draymond can play more of a free safety role and use his intelligence rather than being asked to chase wings around the perimeter, that's a game changer. It extends Draymond's effectiveness. It makes the whole defensive scheme work at a higher level because now you have 2 versatile defenders who can switch everything, one operating primarily on intelligence and the other on physical tools. That combination is deadly. Then the conversation shifted to something I hadn't really considered before, which is what Grant does for the young players on the Warriors roster. Because one of the biggest storylines this season has been the development of guys like Podziemski, Jonathan Kuminga, and some of the other young pieces. And one of the analysts made the point that when young players are forced into roles they're not ready for, it stunts their development. When a young player has to be the primary wing defender because there's nobody else, and he's getting torched by veteran scorers every night, that doesn't build confidence. That destroys it. But when you have a veteran like Grant who can handle the tough assignments, the young guys can play in roles that are more suited to where they are developmentally. They can take on secondary assignments. They can play with less pressure. They can make mistakes without it costing the team the game. And that kind of environment is where young players actually grow and develop into the players you need them to be in the future. And then one of the analysts on the panel brought up the play-in tournament specifically, and this is where the urgency of this move became crystal clear. He said the Warriors are going to Portland for the play-in, and Portland is a team that's given them trouble all season with their athleticism and full court pressure. And the question is, do the Warriors have anyone on their roster right now who can match Portland's physicality and athleticism on the wing? The answer right now is not really. Podziemski is talented but gets pushed around. Kuminga is athletic but inconsistent. The guards are too small. But Jerami Grant can go toe-to-toe with any wing in the league physically. He's not going to get pushed around. He's not going to get bullied. He's going to match that physicality and give it right back. And in a single elimination play-in game where every possession matters and every defensive stop is crucial, having a guy like Grant could literally be the difference between the Warriors' season continuing and their season being over. The panel also discussed the long-term vision, which I think is important context for Warriors fans, because this isn't just about winning one play-in game, it's about positioning the Warriors to maximize whatever time Steph Curry has left as an elite player. And one of the analysts said something that hit really hard. He said Steph Curry deserves better than what the Warriors have given him this year. He deserves to be surrounded by players who can complement his game at the highest level. And right now, the roster around him isn't good enough. It's not deep enough. It doesn't have enough high-level two-way players. And Jerami Grant would change that instantly. He would give Steph a running mate who can actually help him win meaningful games. And isn't that what we all want to see? Don't we all want to see Steph get one more shot at a championship with a team that's actually built to win? Jerami Grant gives the Warriors that shot. And here's the part that really sealed it for me. They talked about the potential lineup combinations with Grant on the roster. Imagine Steph, Clay, or whoever's in the 2 spot, Jerami Grant, Draymond, and Porzingis, or Al Horford. That's a lineup with shooting at every position. That's a lineup with defensive versatility at every position. That's a lineup where every single player can make decisions with the ball and play within the Warriors' motion offense. That's a lineup that can switch everything on defense. That is a championship level lineup, not a play-in level lineup. A championship level lineup. And all it takes is adding one player who fits this system so perfectly, it's almost unfair. And I want to address the elephant in the room because one of the analysts brought it up, and I think it's a fair point. They talked about the fact that the Warriors have had trouble integrating new players in the past. They talked about how the system is complex and it takes time for guys to learn it. And they said, isn't there a risk that Grant comes in and struggles to adjust just like some other additions have? And another analyst responded with something I thought was spot on. He said the players who have struggled to integrate into the Warriors system are typically ball-dominant players who need the ball in their hands to be effective, players who have to change their entire game to fit. Jerami Grant is not that kind of player. Grant is a chameleon. He's played in multiple different systems throughout his career. He's been a role player. He's been a primary option. He's been everything in between, and the one constant is that he adapts. He figures it out. He does whatever the team needs him to do, and the Warriors system rewards exactly that kind of basketball intelligence and adaptability, so the integration risk with Grant is minimal compared to other players the Warriors might target. By the end of the segment, I was just sitting there shaking my head because it was so obvious, so painfully, blindingly obvious that Jerami Grant is the perfect fit for this Warriors team. He solves the wing defense problem. He gives Steph more space to operate. He provides secondary scoring when the offense stalls. He protects the young players from being overexposed. He matches up physically with the best wings in the West. He fits the system like he was designed for it. And he gives the Warriors a legitimate chance to make noise in the playoffs instead of just showing up and getting bounced in the first round. So Dub Nation, I want to hear from you. Is Jerami Grant the move? Is this the addition that puts the Warriors back on the map as a serious contender? Or do you think there's a better path forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure you subscribe because we're going to be breaking down everything Warriors related as the play-in tournament approaches and the off-season rumors start flying. This is going to be a wild ride and you do not want to miss it.